Hello everyone, this is Sven Eric, screenwriter and director from Germany, and in this video I want to talk to you about the new hero's journey, a writing model to develop your scripts and your screenplays. First, I will give you a little insight into the history of the hero's journey, where it all came from. Then I will show you the elements that any hero's journey has. And then I will tell you how to apply those for your own story, for your own script or screenplay. The hero's journey goes back to Joseph Campbell, who wrote The Hero with 1,000 Faces. He was a researcher of myth and mythology, and he found that male hero warrior myth about a male warrior. He goes on a journey and in the end he finds himself basically. So this story has shown up in a lot of cultures, and these cultures were not really connected with each other. It's like a story in the collective unconscious of mankind, so to speak. But we have to be clear about one fact. This is not the only story that mankind has, and it's also not the only myth story mankind has. So it's a very limited point of view on storytelling. And whenever someone tells you to use the hero's journey, to look at the hero's journey, he's basically telling you to do an abstraction. So if you don't write a male hero warrior myth, then you might run into problems. That means you have to abstract the elements enough so that you can actually work with them. And that's why I'm calling it the new hero's journey. I already made a video about the most important elements that any good story has. You can find that in the title cards up there. It's very short and very brief. Go back to the video, check it out. We have these elements, but we also have more elements that you need for a whole script, for a whole screenplay. Let's go through all the elements. I marked those that I already talked about in the other video. So you have the backstory of your story. You have the need, you have the call to action, the want, the supporters, the antagonists, the traitors, the first plot point, the strategy, the antagonist strategy, the attack by the supporters, the darkest hour, the second plot point. You have the traitors revealed, the third plot point, the confrontation with death, the finale, the revelation, and the ending. In the hero's journey, we have a circle, but not all stories are told in a kind of circle. The elements are not always in the same order. This model is very flexible, but at the same time, beware that you don't change it up too much because it can be unrecognizable in the end. Like if you have a narrative that is not linear, then you might confuse the audience. I say might because it might also turn out to be really great. So, what is the backstory? The backstory is basically anything that happened before your story starts. The backstory wound can be three scenarios. It can either be an experience of violence on his behalf, it can be a loss on his behalf, or it can be the experience of failure, or a combination of these three. The world of your story is the whole scope of the story. Everything that is important for the plot. You can write character biographies, you can write about the nature, about the structures that people build in your story. You can write about the religion, about the food, about the clothing. But it has to be important for the plot, it has to be important for the events that happen later on. If it doesn't show up later on, then you are asked the question, why did you even come up with it? Okay, we already had the need. Let's go to the call of action. The call of action is where the need of the main character and the want of the main character, where they meet. When the call to action appears, it's an outside event that makes him come up with the want, with the goal of the story. Now we come to the supporters. You can call them friends, you can call them allies or companions. These are the characters that help your main character. Then we come to the antagonist, of course, and then we come to the traitors. The traitors can be supporters who turn out to be working for the antagonists, or they can be antagonists turning out to work for the hero, for the main characters. So we have very, very special characters that switch sides And in longer formats, in longer stories, you have characters that switch sides more than once. That makes them even more compelling because you have to make these motivations to switch very believable. And sometimes the characters don't just change sides, but they actually have a motivation not to help your main character on certain issues. So this can be very, very intriguing. You have the first plot point. This is the point of no return, when your main character gets locked into the conflict. Next, we got the strategy and the counter strategy of the antagonist. These make up the middle part of your story. How does the main character plan to overcome the obstacles, and how does the antagonist plan to defeat the main character? Next, we have the attack by the supporters, which means that the hero, the main character, the protagonist does something wrong and the supporters attack him for that. Next comes the darkest hour, and this is the moment where the main character thinks that he has lost the game, that there is no hope left. But of course, this is not true. In a story that ends in a sad way, this will be most likely the lightest hour, where the hero thinks he has already won the game. Next comes the second plot point, and here we learn that there is still hope left. Or in a story that ends in a sad way, that it's probably not true that the hero has won, and that there's another shift in the fates, so to speak. Next comes the traitors revealed. This is a moment where we as the audience most of the time learn who the traitor was the whole time, but the hero, the main character, doesn't learn that yet. So this creates suspense because we have more knowledge than the main character, and we want to know when he will find out that fact. He finds out in the third plot point. We have the confrontation with death. This can be a literal confrontation with death, and in the hero's journey, in the old one, it is a concrete confrontation with death. But in our modern storytelling, it's often more a psychological confrontation with death. You have the finale, of course, and you have the revelation, of course, and you have the ending, of course. I talked about those in depth in the other video. All these elements are in a great script, but they are not necessarily in the same order. This model is flexible in a way. You can combine some of these moments together. Sometimes they are really compressed in a very short amount of time. And if you have a longer story, you need more elements. You need more plot points. You need more twists and turns in the story. You often have not only one story going on, but several stories depending on how much main characters you have. And in series you have ABC stories, for example. So you combine those, you have the story of one character and the story of another character. You cross-cut between them. It can become very complicated, but in cases of series like Game of Thrones, you see that the audience can and does follow very complicated stories when it's done right. So don't be afraid to come up with a more complex storyline. Now comes the question how to apply this knowledge, how to apply this model to your own screenplay, to your own script. And here it's very important to notice that the process of screenwriting is not a linear one. So you don't just say, I'm writing this, I'm writing that, and then I'm finished. That's not how it works. We start and we develop something and we go back. And we develop something more and we go back. And we always make those kind of circles. And it's a process where we use our whole brain. We use the right hemisphere and we use the left hemisphere. We use analytic techniques and we use creative techniques. And this model is usable for both. So on the one hand, you come up with scenes, you come up with ideas, you brainstorm. And then you look at those elements and you find them in your brainstormed scenes, in your brainstormed ideas. You think about the darkest hour. What is the darkest hour in my story? Is there even one? Do I need it? What could it be? And so you create a story with these elements, you create a story from these elements, but you're not bound by them. So this model is just about basic storytelling, basic dramaturgy. And if you want to go further, you can ask yourself, how do these elements relate to genres? what are my genres in my story, and what elements do I need to fulfill the promise that these genres give the audience. For example, in a detective story, I expect a mystery, and I expect a mystery to be solved by the end. So you have to have a kind of detective character archetype. You have to have clues to a puzzle. You have to have a puzzle. You have to reveal that puzzle by the end. And it has to be in a satisfying way. That's just one way to go about it. Creative, analytic, and combining the both. I hope this was helpful for you. If you have ideas how I can help you even more on your screenwriter's journey, then put those in the comment section. Give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and yeah, have a great writing day, and I hope to see you soon.